This is the Texas Pete Scoreboard, Texas Pete drama for your mouth. Bob Fasella, Hans Heiser, the college football playoff rankings, Hans, have been tossed like a salad. We're going to discuss that. The SEC championship game is set. We want to get your thoughts on that. Hit us up on Facebook. But what a Saturday, whole weekend of college football, because we knew that someone in the top four had to go down. Mathematics, Alabama, Auburn, the Iron Bowl. Just a great weekend of college football. I can't wait till the new rankings are released on Tuesday, although I think I know exactly how they're going to look.
Oh, do you?
Yes, I do.
Are you going to tell our viewers?
I will here in a moment, yes.
Hey, I will say, walking out the door on Wednesday doing the Bud Light prediction amongst friends shows, our producer, Mark, I said, Mark, we're going to have some serious shakeups here in the top of the thing. And we didn't know who it was, but we both agreed that somebody was going to get knocked off. You knew it was either going to be Auburn or Alabama because, hey, they played each other. But Miami been flirting with disaster all season long. And Rozier, I mean, you say what you want to say about Mark Richt making that decision to pull him late in the game. He was terrible. But at the end of the day, both Miami, unlike Alabama, I should say, controls its own destiny. Clemson, a big win over South Carolina, ACC championship. Winners in next week. Auburn versus Georgia, SEC championship. Winner is in. Alabama, they just got to sit and wait, Bob. But I don't know. I haven't seen your list yet. Maybe they're already in.
All right, I'm just going to reveal it right now, and you can argue the point. Hit us up on Facebook. But the new rankings come out on Tuesday evening. Right. Clemson's going to be number one.
I agree. And let's not lose sight of this. I think Clemson, for the eye test, let's not forget, Kelly Bryant gets hurt. He rolls his ankle in that game against Syracuse. On paper, it's an awful loss. I watched that entire game from start to finish. Look, if Kelly Bryant plays, they win that football game. I think what we're going to see on Monday, in agreement with you, Bob, is that they are going to be the top seed. Tuesday. I'm sorry. Everything's time sensitive with you. But if they win the ACC championship, they will be the number one overall seed.
Absolutely, when it's all said and done. But this Tuesday, they'll be number one. Oklahoma's going to be
Tuesday,
two.
Right?
Tuesday. We'll get it done Tuesday. Oklahoma, a route this weekend made it look
Baker
easy.
Mayfield had to miss 2 plays, man.
Yeah,
that was brutal.
God.
Poor kid.
Horrible.
Wait, hold on. Anyway, real quick. They bring out his jersey. They bring out the guy's jersey at the beginning of the game for the coin flip like he died in battle or something. It was a little too much. Get a hold of yourself, Oklahoma. Sorry.
All right. Sooners are going to be 2. Wisconsin's going to be 3. Badgers an impressive win over Minnesota. It's still unbeaten. And Auburn will be number 4.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and you can make an argument for Auburn to be the number 1 team in the country the way they're playing right now. You beat 2 number 1 schools. You got an opportunity against Georgia to do it again. Be an unbelievable story. But I'm fine with your top 4. But here's the thing. Overall, looking at it, like I said, ACC championship's a play-in game. I don't think the loser's going to have a leg to stand on. SEC championship game, the winner's in. The loser's not going to have a leg to stand on. Oklahoma beats TCU. They're in. Wisconsin beats Ohio State, who now has a question at quarterback. Injury to J.T. Barrett. So all of a sudden, that looks a little bit more possible. So those teams, Wisconsin and Oklahoma, controlling their own destiny. But Alabama's that team, I think we can all agree, that's on the outside looking in that says, well, one of those 2 teams, has a hiccup. They're going to be making a strong case to get into the playoff.
Well,
and nobody would want to play them.
Alabama, Georgia is going to be 5 or 6. Really doesn't matter either way. All right, we got to kick this thing off by taking you back to the Texas Pete Scoreboard, Texas Pete drama for your mouth. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Iron Bowl, Auburn, Alabama. I'm not sure what everyone expected. This is not what I expected. I expected Alabama to roll into the Plains and just get it done by grounding it out, by just having an efficient offense, and by dominating the lines of scrimmage. But you know what? It was exactly the opposite. Auburn literally dominated both lines of scrimmage and win this football game in convincing fashion, although the score wasn't quite as dominating as the Tigers' victory over Georgia. Pretty much the same thing.
Well, the Chip Lindsey's offense was absolutely phenomenal in the first couple drives, throwing a lot of wide receiver screens, getting Kerryon Johnson involved in the passing game as well, which is something we haven't seen a lot of this year, and a lot of crossing routes, which was giving those Alabama linebackers trouble. So they were zipping up and down the field, and then you touched on the Auburn's defense. To me, they're the best defense I've seen in college football this year. Outstanding job of really confounding that Alabama running attack outside of 1 or 2 drives yesterday. A little surprised they got away from it there in the second half, but full credit to Jarrett Stidham and Chip Lindsey and that Auburn offense. We'll talk a little bit about Kerryon Johnson here in a minute, but this is a dangerous football team right now to everybody in the country who's playing arguably the best on both sides of the ball of all teams in the country.
Well, Auburn's got 2 losses. You can't take that away, but they were quality losses in the fact that LSU turned out to be a pretty darn good football team down the stretch, lost to Clemson early in the season. I want to start with Kerryon Johnson.
Yeah.
Had a tremendous game, went over 100 yards. Not only did he rush for a touchdown, but he threw a bullet touchdown strike on the jump pass. Looked better than Tim Tebow doing it. But he hurts his shoulder in the second half. Fourth quarter, leaves the game. Man, oh man, is he going to be back for the SEC championship game?
Well, I don't know. They're keeping it close-lipped at this point. But I will say this. Watching him come out of the tent for when they were addressing the injury, very emotional, as if he knew something had happened. And I can't speculate, what it is. But his body language and the reaction of his teammates, didn't really see him interacting with too many coaches outside the medical staff. It indicated to me that he knew that he was not going to be able to play next Saturday. I could be completely wrong, but I don't understand being emotional the way he was unless it just hurt like hell. Other than the fact that he knew that, maybe I'm not going to be a chance to be on the field for what could be an SEC championship next Saturday.
There's the play. We saw it where he injured the shoulder the first time, and then he injured it again where he simply went down, almost gave up the football before his knee was down. Here's the big problem for Auburn. If he can't play, we saw Cam Martin turn his ankle. And Cameron Petway, yeah, you shoot that up. Cameron Petway hasn't played for 4 games because of a shoulder injury. I don't know where Auburn turns after that. You're going to go to an inexperienced running back, and against Georgia, I'm not sure that's what you want.
Well, the good news is Stidham played his best game. So the passing game, you have to expect they can lean on that a little bit more. But let's not forget, all season long, going back to the Petway injury, we were saying Kerryon Johnson cannot carry the ball 30, 35 times a game. Eventually, it's going to catch up with him. And we didn't know when or how or if it was going to happen at all, but you just kept looking at those carries saying, that's a lot of times for a guy to get the football in the SEC. Sure enough, it might have caught up with him on Saturday. You talked about the lack of depth there, so it's going to be a real challenge for them to get an offensive game plan to go against these Georgia Bulldogs and be able to compete.
We're looking at Stidham here, and I got to give the guy credit, as you said, 21 of 28. He ran for 51 more. But his composure was exceptional.
Yeah, he played out.
Even when he got flushed out of the pocket, he just seemed composed. And this Auburn game plan was spectacular. You open up by taking Alabama wide on these horizontal screen plays and pass plays, and then you take it up the middle, and it was there for Kerryon Johnson. I thought their drive, their first touchdown was spectacular.
Yeah, the whole game, and let's not discount the final touchdown run by Stidham as well, 17 yards for the touchdown. He showed incredible mobility to keep the play alive, but then incredible toughness at the goal line to kind of push over those extra yards when they really needed it, and his teammates rallied to him. Everybody came running up, and you could just tell that they really believe in this guy, and he continues to get better. They got some great playmakers, by the way, on the outside. Guys that catch the ball. Davis yesterday becomes the all-time record holder in Auburn football, most catches in a season. He had some big ones yesterday. So if for some reason Kerryon Johnson can't go and the passing attack has to be a little bit more involved next week, they got some guys that can go out and get it.
All right, for Alabama quarterback Jalen Hurts, it was a tough afternoon. I mean, he just seemed out of sorts. The numbers, Hanja, look at the numbers, and they were good. 13 of 23, $177. He ran for 80, but on third downs, he was not a factor at all. Just 1 of 5 throwing the football, didn't get a first down. And how about that pass he throws into the end zone?
Oh, man.
Almost resulted in an Alabama touchdown, but it was up for grabs and should have been picked off as well.
Yeah, anytime you see a quarterback rolling one way and throwing across his body, it's typically not good. But when you saw the tip and the bounce go up in the air and it looked at first like Alabama had caught it, you say, okay, now I've seen it all in this series. This is how Alabama's going to get back in the game. They review it, and what was a real turning point of the football game, they decide to go for 3 points, which most people would at that time, and they have a miscue on the snap, which you never see Alabama do. So some very uncharacteristic mistakes there. Jalen Hurts, you're talking about, a couple delay of game calls.
Yep.
You had some special teams blunders that you typically don't see from Alabama. So I think this moment got to them. I really do. I think that, when you think of Alabama football and Nick Saban coach teams, you never see the moment get the best out of them. I think the moment got to this team last night.
This did not look like a Nick Saban coach team. What was it, the fourth quarter, I believe, where they had they couldn't get the snaps right, the snap count, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Is this Alabama?
Right.
And I listened to Saban after the game, listened to his news conference, and he gave Auburn credit. He did say, we still deserve to be in the college football playoff. I wouldn't expect him to say anything else, but he seemed a little bit stunned by the result as well. I'm not really sure how this happened the way it happened, except to say that Auburn dominated both the offensive and defensive lines, and that game, set, and match right there.
He was a little testy going into the locker room talking with Allie LaForce.
Yes.
I can't hear you, And I said, wait a second. He could be a little curmudgeon-y at times, but to me that seemed a little uncharacteristic for him. And I think there was a little bit of doubt in his mind at that point if his football team could play with Auburn. That's how impressive Auburn was. You throw that environment on top of it. He knew he was going to have his hands full yesterday, and now he's on the outside looking in, already has a sales pitch down, and hey, you can make any argument you want, but in my opinion, it's not up to you. You don't want it to come down to a 2-conference champion Ohio State Buckeye team and a 1-loss Alabama team on the outside looking in.
Well, that's the only way Alabama's going to get in, I believe, barring something crazy happening, is Ohio State beats Wisconsin, and then Alabama slides into that number 4 spot, because if the committee does it any other way and puts Ohio State ahead, they're hypocrites, because last year they did the exact opposite. I mean, you can't do it. So we'll see what happens there. I want to get some of your comments. Hit us up on Facebook Live. Wesley Brooks says, I assume he's talking about Alabama. They're not God's people. They will have a bad day.
Yeah. Look at Georgia. Georgia had a bad day a couple weeks ago, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Georgia-Auburn game as we get ready just a week from now, 6 days for the SEC championship. But how does Georgia respond to what happened a couple weeks ago? Obviously, the Kerryon Johnson's going to be a major storyline, but I think Kirby's saying some of the things he did in his post-game news conference that he's got his players headed in the right direction. So
Joseph Caney says, brings up a good point. Name a top 10 team Alabama has beat, and please don't mention Florida State, because we all know they were overrated. Alabama's schedule was terrible for any playoff argument, and that is a good point. I think, if it comes down to getting Georgia in versus Alabama, and it's not going to come down to that.
Right.
Georgia's either in or they're not. They win the championship game or they don't. But Georgia's schedule was much better than Alabama's. Alabama didn't beat anybody. LSU was their biggest win of the season.
Yeah, and if you're doing the eyeball test thing and you're saying, okay, I'm going to take the 4 best teams in the country, and there's a lot of coaches that are on this 13-man table that they put together, and if you're talking about the eye test, is Alabama really one of the best 4 teams in the country? Are they in the same conversation with the Clemson, with an Auburn, with an Oklahoma, with the Wisconsin?
I don't know.
If Wisconsin beats Ohio State, I don't see it.
If Wisconsin beats Ohio State.
Wisconsin beats Ohio State.
Okay, Oscar Petway says, if you give number 1 to anyone other than Auburn, then it should be given to Wisconsin. I get where you're coming from.
That's coming from Cam's brother, so.
Is Oscar
nice
Cam's brother?
He could be.
All right.
It's not a very common last name.
All right, we're going to talk some SEC championship game coming up, so we want your thoughts on that. But right now I want to move on to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Georgia finished off the regular season in style, beat up on Georgia Tech 38-7, a rout in Atlanta. Doubled up the Yellow Jackets in total yards, complete domination.
I saw a mock draft the other day that has Roquan Smith going in the top 5 in the NFL draft.
You think?
And in the NFL, they don't draft middle linebackers like that. That's all you need to know about that guy. What a football game he played yesterday. I mean, it literally looked like there were 5 number 3s on the field. Interesting thing about this, and I didn't know this, but Kirby Smart, after last year's 28-27 loss, they dedicated the final 10 minutes of practice every single day going back to camp to this triple option offense to make sure that it wasn't going to happen again. It did not happen again. To me, this was Georgia's most complete football game all season long. Very impressive. What you want to see as a Georgia fan going into next week's championship.
Well, let's talk about the offense. Jacob Fromm, very efficient. 12 of 16 for 224. Dawgs run for 247. Basically, they did everything they wanted to do. Got the ball, took it right down the field in workmanlike fashion. I could not have been more impressed. This is certainly not a team that was looking ahead to an SEC championship game.
No, and what a nice rebound and response for Kirby Smart and his kids after that embarrassing Auburn loss. You know, they knew that it was ahead of them if they beat Kentucky, if they beat Georgia Tech, and they were in the SEC championship, that they would have an opportunity to go to the playoff. Not only have they done that, they have done that arguably with their best 6 quarters of football since halftime of the Kentucky game, and really dialed it in to be where they need to be mentally to get ready for this football game, Bob. And it's a testament to Kirby Smart and everything that this team has laid in front of them. An SEC East title, that's accomplished. An SEC championship, it's going down on Saturday. They win, they're in, anything can happen.
Well, I love the way they played defensively. Like you said, they made a triple treat out of the triple option. Just 226 yards for Georgia Tech and just 188 on the ground. And if Georgia Tech can't run the football, it's over. Can we see the same defensive effort against an Auburn team with a much more varied offense? And Georgia did an amazing job yesterday, which you have to do against Georgia Tech. They held the edge. Georgia Tech ran outside. It just was not going to happen.
Well, they don't have the athletes that Auburn does. No. There's no doubt about it. But, yeah, credit to Georgia yesterday, the way they played. Trenton Thompson went down. Let me know if you've heard this before. A defensive lineman for Georgia goes out of the game with a knee injury against Georgia Tech. Has this ever happened before? Like maybe 4 times every Saturday after Thanksgiving. The chop blocks, all that stuff. Trent Thompson goes down with a knee injury. It's a right knee. It's what he's been dealing with all season long. They came out there. Kirby even walked out there to see if he was okay. He missed 3 or 4 series. Great sign to see he came back. You know, he's not really a starter. I think he's only started a handful of games this year, but he's the main guy there in the middle, and he's a key cog that they're going to need on Saturday against Auburn.
All right, I want to get your comments on Facebook. Gary Cordell says, who has Georgia beat besides an overrated Notre Dame?
Boy, Notre Dame looked bad again last night.
That didn't help Georgia's case at all.
No, it sure didn't.
But an interesting point now, someone on Facebook hit us up on this. What's going to be interesting is getting Auburn away from Jordan-Hare Stadium.
Yeah.
You know, they looked fantastic. That fan base came out and was loud for 2 straight football games. It was unbelievable what an atmosphere that was. In the Georgia Dome, I'm assuming it's going to be about 60.
Georgia Dome's gone, Bob. It's gone. Will you stop?
Didn't they implode that
thing? Actually, still a good part of it standing up.
At the Benz on Saturday, I'm guessing it's going to be, I don't know, about a 60-40.
Oh, man,
what do you think? But it's not going to be, Auburn's not going to have that environment like they had at Jordan-Hare Stadium.
I tell you what, if there's a ticket to be scooped up, these Auburn fans are going to be on. It's not but about an hour, 15-minute drive.
Oh, it's a great, easy drive.
I will say this, if you've never been, and I've had the pleasure of being to a few of them, to me, it is the best sporting event in all of sports. It's not even close. I've been to Super Bowls. I've been to national championship games, Final Fours, Masters, you name it. SEC championship, because it's not corporate fan-based. You're not getting the corporate tickets in there. Everybody in the building is a fan. They're alumni. It is going to be an unbelievable atmosphere on Saturday with Georgia and Auburn.
I might try to weasel my way in. All right,
I got a feeling you'll be there, Bob, in the Georgia Dome by yourself,
I'll be
surrounded by rubble.
All right, back to the Texas Pete Scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving night. Well, first I want to get to South Carolina and Clemson. You know, while Georgia was owning the Peach State, Clemson dominated the Palmetto State battle in Columbia. You see the final score, and Hans, it wasn't even that close. Total yards 469 to 207 as the Gamecocks finished their regular season. Very respectable 8-4, but they were just dominated in this game.
I'm waiting for my phone call from my South Carolina friend who told me that this was going to be a close football game. And look, full credit to them. I think it was defensively, they held them to without 14 points in the final minutes for halftime, which is what you expect from South Carolina. But offensively, Extremely limited. Bentley throws the pick six, down by his own end zone, like midway through the first quarter, and that was all she wrote. Next year, you've done a great job establishing an identity. Deebo Samuel's going to be back. South Carolina's pointed in the right direction. They're going to be in the conversation for the SEC East next year, which is remarkable. Georgia's losing a lot of talent. We know about Tennessee and Florida struggles, but they're pointing in the right direction. Embarrassing loss there yesterday, but they're going the right way. I think they exceeded expectations this year.
Dabo Swinney was not happy with the South Carolina fans throwing stuff out of the end zone, which I didn't see the full effects of that, but that was really... That was not good.
Well, that's what happens when you have rivalry games that kick off at 8 o'clock at night.
People have been drinking.
People have been drinking a little bit long. They're going to throw their bottles on the field. His 100th win, by the way, at Clemson. And just real quick to think about how it started off with them here. Kind of over the top, kind of goofy guy. Didn't really look like it was going to work out. How are we doing now?
Yeah. Just want to say one thing about Clemson. Clemson's good.
They're good.
Clemson is good, and it's. I don't see any way that Miami upsets Clemson in the ACC title game. I don't see that happening.
Have you even heard anybody mention back-to-back all season long? Has it even been talked about or thrown? Really. I haven't. And that's what's in front of them.
And the third straight title game. But their defense against that Miami offense, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a shutout. Dabo, great job. All right, take it back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Texas Pete, spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Egg Bowl Thursday night. Mississippi State is upset by Ole Miss 31-28. Nick Fitzgerald gets hurt early, and that's the story of this game. But props go out to Ole Miss and Jordan Ta'amu, who did another great job. For Matt Luke to finish the season at 6-6 was fantastic. And this team, they came to play. I mean, Fitzgerald got hurt early on, but this Ole Miss team was ready to go from the get-go.
And this game was in Starkville. I mean, this is to go in there and win the way they did on Thanksgiving night. Huge momentum shift there. Expect to get the word from NCAA early in the week as far as what their bowl-eligible situation, their limitations on scholarships and stuff. Once that's set in stone and they know whether or not they're going to be dealing with a bowl ban next year, I think that's when they make the decision as far as coach. Because if they're banned again, they're going to keep the coach they have. They're going to keep Luke. If not, if all of a sudden there's more available for them, they got a lot of talent coming back, they're going to throw their name in the ring with Tennessee, Florida, and Arkansas looking for a head coach.
Self-imposed ban this year, and you're talking about next year. So what do you think? What's your gut feeling? Matt Luke coming back?
I think it depends on whether they're bowl eligible or not. I really do. I look at the talent that they have, especially playmaking, man. Lodge, Brown, I mean, you name it. They got a ton of guys. The quarterback's as good as anybody in the SEC, regardless if it's Patterson or Ta'amu. But I think it all depends on whether or not they're eligible for a bowl next year. But that's not to discredit the job that he's done. Finishing out, winning the Egg Bowl, it's a huge momentum shift for that program.
Well, we were talking before the show, and I think it's a fair point with all the job openings in the SEC. And is this the right time to be looking for a coach if you're Ole Miss? Because you're not going to be first in the pecking order. Right. Do you give Matt Luke one more year and see what he can get done?
That's a great point, because you're talking about basically in a recruiting battle talking about recruiting head coaches with Tennessee, Texas A&M. It looks like Kevin Sumlin's days are numbered. We might get word during the show here that he's going to Arkansas and Florida. So, if you're Ole Miss, you got to think you're at least 4 or 5 in that pecking order as far as coaches in the SEC looking for a job. So, it might not, and not to discredit, he really has done a good job. And you got a lot of questions going into the year answered for next year. You're going to be in the West. You're going to have a brutal schedule, but I think he's done a great job. I think that was a big win for him.
All right, take you back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Last year, Kentucky upsets Louisville on their home field. Last night, it was Louisville returning the favor. Heisman Trophy winner Lamar Jackson had a huge game, 372 total yards, makes amends for the upset last year. Also got into a pretty darn good fight with the Wildcats' James Jones that started a bench-clearing brawl. I was shocked to see how animated these two were.
Right, and you can make an argument that he could have been thrown out of the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which would have changed everything, but somehow he survives, he plays, he goes for 372 yards. really capping off, they'll have a bowl game coming up, obviously, but what has been a tremendous career at Louisville, Heisman Trophy winner. I hope he gets invited this year as a finalist. In my opinion, he's definitely earned that. But from an outsider looking in at this game, Kentucky defensively, they've just really letting things get away from them here towards the end. And Louisville was just a ticked-off machine, man. This is a team that lost a lot of close football games this year. They've dealt with a lot of injuries, and I think the writing was on the wall that it was going to be blowout city, especially with Bobby Petrino calling the shots. So
yeah. Well, after the game, I listened to Mark Stoops' news conference, and he was pretty down about the game. But when you look at Kentucky's season as a whole, to go 7-5, to go 4-4 in the conference, to go bowling for a second straight season, a pretty good season for the Wildcats.
Yeah, no doubt. You got Benny Snell coming back next year, who's going to be a junior. You have to think that maybe a little hype around him early season on for the Heisman Trophy. I know that sounds ridiculous, but this kid's special, man. I mean, he's really good. He's as talented as the guys they've had there in years. I mean, he really is, not just at that position, but overall. So, the quarterback Johnson's gone. So they got to get things figured out on defense. That's where it all begins, especially if they're going to run the ball and control the clock with Snell. They got to get some answers on defense. But I look at it the other way. Yeah, it was a successful season that you won 7 games, but you let so many of them get away from you. I mean, that Florida game where you didn't have enough people on the field, you get embarrassed by your in-state rival.
About that.
Yeah, I think that it could have been better.
Well, he's done a great job of recruiting at Kentucky, but Kentucky somehow, if it's going to compete for SEC championships or 8, 9, 10 win seasons, they got to get better athletes, and I'm not sure if that's possible. I mean, that's just tough.
Well, and here's the other thing is Tennessee's down, and Tennessee's their biggest recruiting rival. So that's an easy conversation to have with a young man saying, hey, look, we're winning football games. We beat Tennessee. How many games did Tennessee win the SEC this year? There'd be 0. Who's their head football coach? They don't even know. So you need to come to Kentucky and play football. So the picking is right for those athletes in Tennessee right now.
You know, while we're talking about some of the other games, folks on our chat, man, they're breaking down the SEC championship game.
They got to figure it out. You got to pressure him.
We're going to do that a little bit later on. Brock, Justin, Regina, we're going to talk about that coming up. I want to take you back to the Texas Pete Scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete from Friday. Mizzou won its 6th straight game, ending the Brett Bielema era in Arkansas, which basically fired him on the way to the locker room. Hey, Coach, you want to come over here for a moment? And he's done. All right, got to ask you, let's not spend too much time on the game, although this was an amazing finish. I was glued to the end of this game. They were going back and forth.
But didn't you just know that Arkansas was going to find a way to mess it up one way or the other?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. You knew it was coming.
And a lock with another 3+ touchdown game.
By the way, SEC record, most touchdowns in a season.
What was the number?
It was 38. Now he's got 40, so he's got the record.
All right.
43. My bad, he threw 5.
Yeah. All right, so who's the next coach at Arkansas? Let me get this out of the way. Is Gus Malzahn a realistic possibility?
I think so. I think he's probably top 5. If he decides, if they end up.
Does he personally want to leave Auburn?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. Sure. If
I would think human nature at this point, I would feel a little underappreciated for the job that I've done at Auburn. That's just my personal take. But you don't know what his family, his wife, and kid, all that stuff. You know, home is Arkansas. But I tell you what, if you go to Arkansas, the good news is it's a blank canvas. You start offense, defense, whatever, man. They got all kinds of problems.
All right. Lane Kiffin?
To Arkansas? I really want him to go to Florida. I want him to go to Florida.
Job.
I don't know. I would definitely consider it. No. Interesting thing about Les Miles, I read earlier in the week that he has shown strong interest in the Oregon State job, which is just out of nowhere. But I could see him, he's 66. I could see him just going off to Corvallis and being a pain in the rump in the Pac-12 for the next 10 years. I could see that.
Well, here to me might be the realistic choice for Arkansas is Blake Anderson, who's at Arkansas State. He has taken that team. It will take them to their 4th straight bowl game. He's 31-18 overall. Still have Troy left on the schedule, but I think that's a realistic possibility. He's an Arkansas guy. He's from the state, and he may not be the big name that some people want, but
right.
I think
they went big name with Bielema. How did that work out?
Yeah, not so good. All right. Meantime, Barry Odom.
Right. Back,
Barry
man.
Odom, he went from 1-5 to being fired to 7-5, and he's now in the discussion for SEC coach of
As
the
he
year.
should be. As he should be. I mean, 0-4, they go 4-4 in conference, and, you know, so long as Locke's coming back next year, which everyone expects him to, they're going to be in the conversation with the SEC East. The SEC East, I mean, outside of Florida and Tennessee, which are kind of the wild cards, you don't know what you're going to get out of them, but South Carolina and Missouri, they got a lot of talent coming back next year. Benny Snell at Kentucky, I think it's a conference on the rise.
All right, like I said, the folks on Facebook have this running conversation. Butch Silva says, if I hear one more Georgia fan say that the atmosphere at Jordan-Hare Stadium cost them the football game, I'm going to lose it. Y'all were dominated from start to finish. It was like playing a high school football.
Well, so if you want to make that argument, sir, did the atmosphere not get the best out of you guys in Baton Rouge?
That's a good point.
It's the same thing that happened to you guys. Winning on the SEC on the road is tough, okay? So you say whatever you want to say. Same thing happened to Auburn. That's it. That's my point.
All right, I'm getting a little off track
but
there.
It's true.
I apologize.
I mean, going in the SEC on the road to these upper echelon schools, LSU, Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, it ain't easy, man. I don't care who you are.
Oh, I agree. Nick Saban, it's not easy for Nick Saban. Look at the game that
poor Nick.
Mississippi State, or what game am I thinking of? Yeah, Mississippi
Nick.
State. You played them tough. All right, take it back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. LSU finishes off a solid second half of the season by trouncing Texas A&M. 45-21 is the final count. Danny Etling throws for a career-high 347 yards and 3 touchdowns. Darius Geis, again, over 100. Headed to their bowl game. Got to love the direction of this team.
Yeah, you know, you take that Troy loss out of there, they're 10-2. They're probably a top 10 team, and it looks like they're going to the Outback Bowl. We'll play a Big Ten school down there, either Michigan State, Penn State, something like that. Who knows? But you know, the storyline after this, it's interesting, and it's on SEC Country. You can read the article. Pretty credible source talking about Matt Canada being a guy who's on a lot of people's list for head coach. Of course, this is his first year as OC down at LSU, but apparently that there was a falling out of sorts after that Troy loss where they had the closed doors meeting with Coach O and the offense, which if it's true, really a testament to Coach O as far as how he's kept this thing together if he's not seeing eye to eye with his offensive coordinator.
As far as the Aggies are concerned, nothing official yet from Texas A&M on Kevin Sumlin. Houston Chronicle is reporting that he has already been told he is out. We're still waiting for something official. The question, well, first off, if you're Texas A&M, if you're running the show, if you're Scott Woodard, athletic director, are you moving on?
Yeah, I think that this has been toxic and been brewing since the beginning of the season to kind of throw your business out there and say this is what you got to do before the end of the year. You hear Kevin Sumlin's post-game news conference last night. Like one of the reporters asked him, how is it like this week, knowing that that this could be the end for you these last couple of days? He said, this week. He's like, this has been going on all year.
Exactly.
What are you talking about?
Coaching for my job every week.
Every night. And you could tell, on his face, it just wears on you. Now, yeah, he gets a check for whatever million as far as the buyout, but, as far as his family and, not knowing where he's going to be. I thought UCLA, possibly would have been a good fit for him if he decided he wanted to stay in coaching or whatever. Obviously, Chip Kelly took that, but who knows?
All right, here's the list. Jimbo Fisher, who didn't want to talk about it yesterday after the Florida State game. He didn't say no. He left the window open. Is Jimbo Fisher interested in Texas A&M? And I think the main reason he would have interest in that job because despite what you think about Florida State does not have the money and the facilities that Texas A&M has, nor does Georgia and some other schools, and Jimbo Fisher would like to see a little bit more.
Yeah, I just... For the reason, his son having that ailment, the fact that if you know the story behind it, I'll be real brief with it. It was a unique disease that nobody had really put any research and development into. His wife went out, they found a certain amount of kids in the country that were ailing from the same thing. They built the headquarters for this right there in Tallahassee. So I just can't see him uprooting that. His son dealing with the Fanconi disease, I don't see that. For A&M, I look at a guy like Chad Morris.
Chad Morris, SMU.
Chad Morris is the guy, man. He went to school there.
Yep.
He's had tremendous success as a coach. Now a little bit of success at SMU. They're going to a bowl. And this is a guy who coached for 10 years in high school in Texas. He has tremendous recruiting ties there. If he just exclusively, you're a Texas guy. I mean, if he just exclusively recruited Texas players to come to A&M and be a part of those facilities and be a part of the SEC West and start a new tradition, I think that's my guy. I really do. I mean, because he can coach.
Matt Campbell is another name I'm hearing from Iowa State. He had an amazing season this past year, just finishing up his second year at Iowa State. It
just seems like a little much for him. Coming from Iowa State, that just seems like an awful big jump. I think Chad Morris, having the experience at Clemson, big boy football, would set him up well for that
Let me
job.
throw out one other name since you say that. A guy that has Texas ties and experience, Mike Leach.
Mike Leach. Mike Leach is going somewhere. You can tell after that game last night, that embarrassing loss in the Apple Cup.
They weren't ready to play, man.
He's got one foot out the door. And they've done that a couple times this year. They've shown up for games. I think he's out of there. I don't know who wants him the most, whether it's Arkansas, whether it's Tennessee, whether Ole Miss gets in the conversation. I think he'd be great in Oxford. It'll be interesting to see. But A&M, I think A&M's going to be between Jimbo. If they can't get Jimbo, they offered to Chad Morris, and he would not turn that down.
All right, speaking of Jimbo, take it back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Florida State, 38-22 final. Florida State puts the final nail in Florida's coffin, thank goodness. Seminoles scored 38 points, Hans, despite just 216 yards of total offense, and that pretty much tells the story of this one for Florida. Turnovers, and Felipe Franks wasn't bad. He was awful.
Yeah, you throw 4 turnovers turning into 28 points. That's going to lose most football games for you. Randy Shannon, I mean, he was dealt a bad hand, but somebody had to do it. 1-3 under his watch. 4-8 finish to the season. You make an argument they could have gone 1-11. I mean, honestly, the games they won, the Hail Mary, all this stuff. I mean, it's been a mess. I think the fact that Chip Kelly turned the job down to go to UCLA, granted, it's West Coast, it's Santa Monica, it's beautiful out there. I get it, but Florida's a heck of a job. But the fact that he walked away from this, a little curious to me. There might be a little bit more turmoil in that athletic department than we're led to believe. And Franks, by the way, he's not the guy. They got to find a quarterback.
No, they got to find a quarterback. All right, now that Chip Kelly has signed that 5-year deal with UCLA, where does Florida turn? And the obvious choice is Central Florida's Scott Frost.
Right, yeah. Frost went to school there. UCF, a huge win. By the way, maybe the game of the year between USF and UCF. I tell you, it's going to be his to turn down. It's going to be his to turn down.
Well, he went to school at Nebraska, and of course Nebraska has the opening. You know, does he want Nebraska? Does he want Florida?
Man, you talk about
go back to your alma mater, you go back to go to a school where you think you can win.
Two traditional powerhouse football schools in Nebraska and Tennessee, and I'll even throw Florida in the mix, where people are kind of like, I don't know that I want anything to do with that right now. That's where we're at.
Does Dan Mullen want anything to do with that right now?
No, because here's the thing about Mullen. You got Fitzgerald coming back for his senior year, man. That's right there. That's an opportunity to do something really special next year. I wait another year and just see how it goes.
You know, you're making $4.5 million in Mississippi State. Why leave to go into the pressure cooker that is Florida? Maybe for a chance to win a national championship that you can't win at Miss State. But, you know, 8 wins a year, and your fan base is just loving you. Why leave?
Well, you know, when Gruden takes the job at Tennessee, Mullen can become the new Monday Night Football analyst with Sean McDonough. That's the big plan.
Well, here's the question, I think. If Scott Frost says no and takes the Nebraska job, or heaven knows, maybe he stays at Central Florida, I don't think that's really an option. I think Florida's going to have to go down to its a little bit lower tier as far as named coaches. I think you're looking at Mike Norvell of Memphis.
Yeah.
Good coach, great job, has his team in the
American
Championship game.
I always thought he was older than he is because he's got a little gray hair. I thought maybe he was. He's 35 years old. 35 years old. And Memphis, you know, they compete, man. They put it on them yesterday. It's going to be a heck of an AAC championship between Memphis and Central Florida.
Of course, we'll talk about him in the Tennessee job. But if Mike Norvell is not your guy, is there a possibility that it's Lane Kiffin?
Do you want? I mean, I don't know.
He's a big name. He knows how to run an offense. He's having an amazing season at Florida Atlantic. I mean, they're 8-3. They're undefeated in the conference.
Tennessee. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how the dominoes fall as far as which one of these jobs gets taken first, and then the kind of the succession to follow. Because I have a feeling that maybe Tennessee's the last one out there. I think Tennessee might be the last job open, because if I'm a head coach, that's probably the last place I would want to go out of all the schools that are looking for head coaches right now. That's including Arkansas.
We're still getting a great war on the scroll here on the SEC championship game. Brock Weaver, though, says Dan Mullen is a god in Mississippi State, and I agree. He's a god there. He's not leaving. James Thornton, is Dan Mullen a serious contender for Tennessee? We're going to talk about that one in a moment. Well, we might as well just go ahead and move on. The Texas Pete Scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete for the first time since Tennessee and the SEC got together. The Vols go winless in the conference. 0-8. Vanderbilt owns the Volunteer State, 42-24. Great finish for Ralph Webb as he runs for $166, 6th on the all-time rushing list.
Look at the score.
Yeah,
in Knoxville.
In Knoxville.
This is what's going on right now. And you're telling me that if I was a head coach, if I'm Norvell or if I'm whomever, I want to go coach? Absolutely not. It is a dumpster fire right now. We have some comments coming in saying no, absolutely no to Kiffin, violations galore. I don't know that that's the case. I think he learned from his lesson, and I don't know that he's ever really had that kind of reputation. I know one thing, the guy can coach, and he can put some points on the board, something that you are really having trouble doing right now. I will say this about Coach Mason. We were debating on Wednesday's Bud Light prediction show if we thought he was on the hot seat. And it seemed like because of the way that they were finishing up, just getting blown out week after week, that maybe they readdressed their coaching situation if it happened again to Tennessee. But I think with that win, I think Coach Mason's safe. He'll be back next year. Shermer's gone. But nice finish up for them to win that in-state rivalry.
James Franklin set expectations, set the bar so high that a 5-7 season at Vanderbilt seems disappointing, at least to the Commodore Nation, right. But you know that's not a bad year. Although you want to win one more game in conference than just one, a few more games anyway. But all right, so Mike Norvell, it's not the job for him. It's a dumpster fire. Is it realistic to talk John Gruden?
No,
I don't think so.
No. Yeah, I can't imagine Gruden. You know, the name that surprises me that you have not really heard, we kind of threw it around earlier in the year, was Mike Bobo. Colorado State. I just felt like his ties with the SEC East, his experience as an offensive coordinator in this conference, his showing his ability to develop quarterbacks over the years. And I thought that he would be a guy they would entertain. T. Martin's name's been brought up, but here's a guy who doesn't really have head coaching experience. I think if he was brought in, it would be an offensive specialist role as either coordinator, quarterbacks coach, something like that. But it's got to be. Would you agree? It's got to be an offensive-minded guy.
I would think so. Although Renee Adams-Morris says Kevin Steele to Tennessee. Great defensive coordinator, definitely has the background. David Frazee, Tennessee, please get a coach. You are making the SEC look bad.
Now, what about Matt Canada? We were talking earlier about Matt Canada, being some talk out there about him leaving LSU to pursue one of these Power 5 head coaching vacancies. If they were interested in him, it looks like he's willing to make the jump. Matt Canada's offense, it took a little while to get going, but I think we're just starting to kind of see what it's capable of in LSU. Very impressive last night in their win.
By the way, Bob Ford says, Memphis owns the Volunteer State, not Vandy. Get it right, boys. Bob, you are correct.
Can't argue with that.
You are absolutely correct.
Maybe that's who's taking advantage of all this recruiting nonsense going on in Tennessee instead of Kentucky. Memphis saying, look, you don't want to go to Vanderbilt or Tennessee. You want to come to Memphis where we win football games.
Mike Norvell has just stepped it up since replacing Justin Fuente. A lot of us thought, Justin Fuente did this amazing job there. The program is going to start on a little bit of downward slide. But Mike Norvell has done an amazing job. If I'm Tennessee, I start with him. I think I start with him. Just a solid young coach, knows the Volunteer State. I start with him. Although there are some that'll say, hey, Jeff Fisher would turn this thing around.
Jeff Fisher. Jeff Fisher, unbelievable.
All right. Enough said on that. Let's hand out some game balls.
Let's do it.
Say defensively, SEC game ball.
Defensively, Roquan Smith. This guy was outstanding yesterday. 8 tackles, 3 for a loss, 1 sack. Guy was all over the field. He's going to be a top 5 NFL pick, at least top 10. He is the heart and soul of that Georgia defense. He's the worst nightmare that Paul Johnson's ever seen. I mean, honestly. I mean, you put a guy that's supposed to be in, to slow that offense down, Roquan Smith's the guy.
He's not the most talented player on that Georgia defense, but he comes to play every single week.
He's everywhere.
He's the best player. Not the most talented,
right.
He's the best.
He's the best guy they've had on that side of the ball since Jarvis Jones. And Jarvis Jones, remember, in college was incredible when he was healthy.
I'm going to give it up for the Auburn defense as a whole. Limited Alabama to 14 points. Tide is just 3 of 11 on 3rd downs, 1 of 4 on 4th downs. They were perfect on 4th downs coming into this game. Jalen Hurts, this might be a little bit strong, but he was a non-factor in the game, thanks to that defense. Ditto the running game. Ditto Calvin Ridley. They just took those guys out of the game. The D-line dominated that Alabama offensive line. And it was a thing of beauty. Alabama, and this is more, I guess, on the Auburn offense than the Auburn defense, but Alabama held the ball on the field offensively for just 23 minutes.
Yeah, that's a recipe for disaster, no question about it. Offensive game ball, I'm going Kerryon Johnson. I mean, we know he got hurt, his injury. We'll talk a little bit about that before we get out of here. But, golly, you give the guy the ball 25, 30 times a game, eventually he's going to get banged up. That play at the goal line was incredible. And let's not forget the job he did in the passing game yesterday. Showed really soft hands, tremendous patience. He really is Le'Veon Bell. Like, if you have to compare him to somebody, he runs like him. He's got soft hands like him. You can use him in the passing game. He's an outstanding football player. If he's not able to go on Saturday, I won't give it to you yet. We'll save it.
By the way, Steve Trigg says, no Jeff Fisher. That guy gets...
Oh, we were joking. We were joking. He's got about as big a chance as Candace Parker does as coaching the Vols next year.
I'm going to give out my offensive game ball to a guy that was on a losing team yesterday. His team wasn't even in the game. Benny Snell. I think it's more of a year-long award. He runs for 211 yards in a loss for the season. He's over 1,300 yards for the year. Just a tough running back. Underrated. I know, you talk about the top 5 running backs in the SEC. His name is probably not coming up. Heck, 2 of the backs are on Georgia. 2 of them could be on Alabama. But he's done a great job, and you mentioned it earlier in the show, just a sophomore, so he's back for at least 1 more season.
Yeah, him and Locke next year from Missouri going to be back, so you have to think a little bit of Heisman hoopla, thrown in those kids' directions and well-deserving. One thing I want to hit on real quick before we get out of here, a guy texted in as far as the Florida head coaching job, texted in, hit the Facebook page, Charlie Strong. Charlie Strong, you cannot deny, he got a raw deal at Texas.
What raw deal did he get at Texas?
He got a raw deal at Texas. You're not a Charlie Strong fan?
I like Charlie personally, but he had 3 seasons and he lost 7 games 3 years in a row. Where's the raw deal?
He inherited a mess.
It was a little bit of a mess, but he didn't win games.
I think at Florida, if he were the head coach there because of his ties there, I think he could build a winning program. It would be a defensive identity. He would have to give up responsibility of the offense to some maybe a newcomer offensive guru to get a quarterback in there, because going back to Jeff Driscoll, I mean, think about this. This has been going on for 7 or 8 years since Tebow left. They can't get a quarterback. So, I could see Charlie Strong at Florida.
Here's what I'll say about Charlie Strong. A defensive guru, and no denying that he was a great defensive coordinator, but his defenses at Texas the last 2 years stunk, and his defense this year at South Florida was awful. They only had 2 really tough teams that they played this year, and they lost both of them. Just saying. All right, let's move on.
Throw it up there.
Let's talk about the SEC standings. I want to start it off with the East. All Georgia Bulldogs. A couple of teams did make a nice run to improve their lot in life, specifically talking about South Carolina and Missouri. Top 4 teams in the East are all going bowling.
Yeah, real quick on Missouri going 0-4 and 4 now. The 4 wins that they won were against the 4 teams that can't win. So you beat Arkansas, you beat Tennessee, you beat Vanderbilt, and you beat Florida. It's what you're supposed to do, okay? Let's not get all carried away here, but those are the 4, without question, worst 4 teams in the SEC.
I hear you, but they won them.
Yeah, they did win them.
All right, SEC West, a little shake-up after yesterday as Auburn and Alabama finished tied for the West, but obviously with the head-to-head victory, Auburn is going to the SEC championship game. LSU rallies for a nice win. In the West, you have 5 teams going to bowls, and if Ole Miss was eligible, that would be 6.
Yep, so no Ole Miss, no Tennessee, no Vanderbilt, no Florida, no Arkansas, no bowling for you. You got Bama, Auburn, and Georgia, going to weed things out, and it's either going to be the sugar, rose, peach, or orange for them. As far as who plays in those games. And then these are the other bowl things I thought were interesting. South Carolina going to the Citrus Bowl. We got LSU going to the Outback Bowl to play a Big Ten school. Missouri to the Liberty Bowl. A&M to the Tax Slayer Bowl. Kentucky to the Music City, and Mississippi State to the Belk Bowl. It's going to be a costly loss for them against Ole Miss. You had to think that they were having a little bit higher expectations in the Belk Bowl. But
and we'll find out officially about the bowls.
Correct.
A week from today. I wonder if we'll actually have them for the show. If we do, we'll let you know about it. We'll pass it along. Got to talk SEC championship game. Finally, at the Benz. It's not at the Dome.
No, you can go to the Dome.
At the Benz. It is Georgia. It is Auburn. We've seen this dance once before. Auburn dominated, but that game was at Jordan-Hare. When you look into your crystal ball, how does this game play out?
Georgia has got to protect Jake Fromm. They've got to protect Jake Fromm. You look at those 2 plays in that game, the one where he tried to hook up with Ridley over the middle, timing was just a little bit off. That was a protection issue. The Hail Mary that the play call was there, that was there. It was a protection issue. They were unable to run the football because they weren't able to run block. Basically, they were manhandled by Auburn's front 7. So they have got to find a way to address that, whether it's keeping somebody in the backfield to help him upright. But they've got to find a way to get that done. I think defensively, they made some plays, but because of their offensive shortcomings, it put them in a short field, put them in tough situations. And then one thing real quick about Georgia, the last 2 weeks, 7 penalties for 75 yards against Auburn, 7 more penalties last week for 80 yards against Kentucky. Yesterday, only 2 for 20. So maybe cleaning things up will help them a little bit as well on Saturday.
Well, we just saw Auburn do a pretty darn good job against an Alabama defense that is exactly the same system as Kirby Smart and Mel Tucker are running at Georgia. What's going to be different about that? What is Georgia going to be able to do that Alabama couldn't do and that Georgia couldn't do the first time around?
I believe in my heart, I really do. I think Georgia has more playmakers than Alabama. I watched that Alabama game yesterday. Outside of Calvin Ridley, who do they have that's not a running back? Nobody else was making plays. I think Georgia, you've seen whether it's Wims, whether it's Hardman made a big catch yesterday. Nauda's been underutilized all season long, and their running backs make more plays in the passing game, in particular Swift. I think Georgia has more playmakers. It's just a matter of protecting Fromm and that offensive line playing better. Now, they're going to have their hands full, but they've got to play better. You take the crowd out of the game, who knows, anything can happen. But, of course, the big wild card in this game, Bob, is no Kerryon Johnson, possibly.
Right. I agree. And I think that's where Georgia's defense could get a break where Alabama didn't. Auburn did all its damage when Kerryon was still in the game. Without Kerryon Johnson, who knows about Cam Martin, who knows about Cam Petway? Without those guys, it's going to be a little bit different situation for Jarrett Stidham, who was on yesterday. And one thing I know Auburn fans say playing at home wasn't that big a deal, but take Stidham, put him in the Dome where, he's going to have to face a pro-Georgia crowd. It might be 50-50, I don't know. But it's definitely going to be a lot different than it was playing at Jordan-Hare. I think Auburn's going to score some points. They just are. Their offense is that good. Can Georgia's offense score points against that defense because they couldn't do it a couple of weeks ago? Can they keep Jake Fromm clean? Can they keep that pocket clean? And can these guys, will they get into space to where they can make plays? Because they just didn't get into any space in that first game.
I don't think that they can. I think it's going to be a game where a mistake's going to cost either side. I mean, you go back to Clemson-Auburn, the very first game of the season, 14-6 your final score. The loss they had against LSU, you lose it on a punt return to DJ Chark. So you take that away, that's a 17-point game. So nobody's been able to put up points on Auburn, much less a freshman quarterback. So if Georgia's going to win this game, their defense has to step up, and it's going to have to be a nail-biting, grinded-out affair, which leans a little bit more towards Georgia favor if Kerryon Johnson is unable to play with some of those other tailbacks you mentioned. But I expect a very low-scoring game in this.
Well, if I'm Georgia offensively, I go back to that LSU film,
right,
second half, and see what the heck did LSU do.
A lot of guys moving all over the place and stuff. That's what happened.
Well, nicely done by Priscilla White on the Facebook Live page. She, do you have that? The War Eagle. She put it up about 400 times.
No, I haven't. Hey,
Maurice Carter says, "Great analogy, Hans." Not really sure what you're talking about there. I don't remember any great analogy. Nicely
Bob,
done.
you work with me every Sunday morning. You should be used to this by now. This should
be great analogy. All right, before we go, Mark tells us he's got to go to the restroom, so we got to get out of here.
He's hungry.
He's hungry. He's hungry. Excuse me. Want to make a little prediction?
Oh, I got to find out if Kerryon Johnson's playing. If Kerryon Johnson doesn't play, Georgia wins the game.
Well, if he does play, how effective can he be?
Man, they shoot it up. You'd be amazed what these kids can do
right,
when they're shot up. No, I'm being serious. If Kerryon Johnson plays, I think Auburn wins, vice versa. I will say this, though, one last note. Alabama's not in. I don't care what happens. They're not in as a one-loss team. They're not getting in. They haven't beaten anybody. And I think people are just tired of Alabama. I mean, honestly. And I think for that reason, they don't get voted in, and I think they play Central Florida in the Peach Bowl. So their goal of Atlanta to Atlanta will be accomplished in some sense.
Well, unlike the first game, this game is going to be a lot closer, but I think a close game, I'm still going to give the edge to Auburn, something that my friend Dwayne Tick Coleman said.
Now you come around. Now you're coming
Auburn has the best kicker in football. And I'm not going to argue that point.
Right.
That guy has been solid. He is good from 50+. If we're in a tight game, I give the edge to Auburn. Yeah, the way Auburn's play, if that team shows up at a neutral site, I just don't see how Georgia gets it done.
Well, we'll see. I think it's going to be low scoring. We'll see what happens with Kerryon Johnson. I will say this, his body language going into the tent, coming out, very emotional, indicates to me that something is in fact wrong to where he will not play. Still no line on this game. The line before the injury was at 2.5. Auburn favored, so that's amazing to me. 2.5-point spread on the heels of what just happened, 40-17 2 weeks ago. Shows you how hard it is to beat a team twice in 1 year.
Well, hopefully you'll join us next week when we'll wrap up the SEC championship game as well as look at the bowls, look at the national championship picture. For Hans Heiser, I'm Bob Fasella. Have a great week. See you next Sunday.
See you.